Hi everyone, my name is Alina Sandoval and my fellow group members are Alfonso Donato and Annabelle Verdeen. The topic my group and I chose for our study is about gender and how it's portrayed in children's picture books. Related to our topic is a popular theory that was introduced in 1981 by American psychologist Sandra Bem, who is known for her work in gender studies. Her gender schema theory proposes that children learn about gender roles from their culture. This theory explains how in early childhood, children construct their gender schemas or gender-related beliefs. They develop a concept of what it means to be male or female, what actions and characteristics are appropriate and acceptable for their gender or biological sex. It describes how gender schemas influence children's self-esteem, processing of social information, and subsequent behavior. Additionally, there are different channels through which ideas about gender are communicated. One incredibly important example is through literature that young children are introduced to in school or at home. A quote from a popular gender-related study states that children's books reflect cultural values and are an important instrument for persuading children to accept those values. The article we got that quote from was actually from a widely referenced study from 1972 that we based our own study on. The topic of the study was sexual socialization in picture books for preschool children. It examined how sex roles are portrayed in award-winning and top-selling children's books and include winners of the Caldecott and Newbery medals and Little Golden Books. However, the majority of the examples referenced in the study were from the Caldecott books published within a span of 5 years. The study found that within these books, females were underrepresented throughout. Female characters played insignificant roles with a limited range and were seen primarily in traditional and stereotyped roles such as mother and housewife. In comparison, males had a wide range of possibilities, such as carpenters, executives, storekeepers, kings, and more. Additionally, this study also looked at representation in terms of the number of pictures present for male and female characters. For human characters, the ratio was 11:1. For every 11 males, only one female character was present. The bias was even greater when taking into account clearly gendered animals. The purpose of our study is to examine how the language used in early childhood literature has changed across time, how this contributes to gender socialization, and what this change means in terms of gender development. My group hypothesized that the changes in language used to represent gender in children's literature are reflective of a growing flexibility in accepted gender roles and identity, moving toward more fluid representations.
So our study, or compared to the study from 1972, ours just looked at popular children's books from the 1960s to the 2010s. We searched lists online for popular books from each decade and chose according to what was most popular and what was most available. Our studies also features a smaller sample size, and we examined specifically the change in language usage between the decades. Our study also focuses on 7 books, 1 per decade from the 60s to the 2000s and 2 for the 2010s. Our initial focus was on distribution of gender denotative items, for example, gender exclusive noun forms and pronouns, and the distribution of content words, or words that carry lexical meaning. That is, we look at how frequently content words were attached to an item denoting one gender compared to items denoting another gender. And this distribution was then qualified according to the following criteria. Perfectly even meant that for each gender represented in the text, there were the same number of items. Even, there was a small difference in this number, and somewhat even, it's a medium difference between the number of items for each gender in the text. Uneven and markedly uneven, respectively, are large and extremely prominent differences between the number of items for each gender represented in the text.
Upon examination of our sources, we later found that they could be further grouped into separate categories for comparing the data. The 3 categories we organized the books into are occupational books, books that include covert examples of gender nonconformity, or examples that weren't as clear, and books that include overt examples of characters' nonconformity, that are more explicit in terms of rejecting gender norms. In the 1963 book, What Do People Do All Day by Richard Scarry, we found that the text displayed a straight-laced depiction of gender roles. There was a considerable difference between the number of nouns and pronouns that were associated with males in comparison to those associated with females. Out of the 34 items that were counted, approximately 82% of those were linked to males, which marks a sharp majority. Furthermore, the distribution of content words skewed heavily male as well. In the 1974 book, He Bear, She Bear by Stan and Jan Berenstain, we found that there was an even to perfectly even distribution of gender indicative items between males and females. There was also notable usage of the word we throughout the text. Overall, this pattern of evenness could be observed throughout several categories such as distribution of content words, distribution of pronouns, and distribution of gender noun forms. And in our last book from this category, a 2014 book called Clothesline Clues to Jobs People Do, we found that the distribution of pronouns used in association to males and females was somewhat even. The same could be observed in regards to distribution of content words. Beyond that, we didn't observe any examples of gender noun forms within the book.
Why is this significant? In the book, What Do People Do All Day, the disproportionate ratio of items associated with male characters versus female characters in this book directly correlates to the amount of roles present for both genders. Additionally, there is a larger variety in roles present for males than females. This markedly uneven distribution demonstrates the text's rigid representation of gender. The content words exclusively attached to female characters were in regard to housework and their family, like taking care of the house and giving birth. This implies that there was a strong association of femininity with domestic roles during this time period. In comparison, the ones attached to male characters referred to occupations like farmer, grocer, and electrician, reflecting the belief that men should be the breadwinners of the household. Additionally, verbs such as save and rescue were only attributed to male characters, despite there being a nurse role for women. This pattern of attachment denotes the association of masculinity with proactivity. Lastly, a significant portion of nouns used to represent male characters are gender exclusive, despite there being gender-neutral terms that express these occupations. Such forms included fireman, postman, and mailman. The use of these noun forms implies that only men can do these jobs, further illustrating the text's strict ideas about what men and women can do, what are considered the proper roles for the genders represented in the text.
So, like Annabelle said about He Bear, She Bear, the most prominent feature of the text is its use of we, and the way content words are more frequently attached to plural referential expressions than to singular. It's not necessarily a matter of plurality, but the way we is innately gender neutral, like both singular and plural use of they. This pattern of attachment, then, the consistent and widespread attachment of content words to we in the text, contextualizes those words as gender neutral. This usage of we denotes the text's fluid representation of gender via implicature. The inherent neutrality of we displaces a preferentiality of content words with which it's connected. Or in other words, we shows that roles aren't exclusive to one gender, but that both or other genders can participate.
In comparison to What Do People Do All Day, the distribution of items and clothesline clues to jobs people do displayed an overall evenness, illustrating a more balanced representation of roles present for both genders. Additionally, the absence of gender-exclusive noun forms shows that words used in regard to occupations are gender neutral within this time period. Examples included words such as mail carrier and firefighter, which were previously mailman and fireman in the 1963 book, implying that these roles were strictly for men. However, in this book, they were exclusively assigned to female characters, showing in another way that women can do these jobs too. Creation of gender-neutral equivalents implies that there was something problematic with the gender-exclusive forms and that they needed to be changed. This creation and usage shows how ideas about gender roles have become more progressive over time.
In our second category of books, ones which included covert examples of nonconformity, we included The Paperback Princess and The Rainbow Fish. In the 1980 book, The Paperback Princess by Robert Munsch, We found that the distribution of pronouns and gendered noun forms was somewhat even between males and females. We observed a higher variation in regards to the distribution of content words, which skewed female. In the 1992 book, The Rainbow Fish by Marcus Pfister, we found significantly uneven distributions all across the board. The book omits gender-exclusive noun forms and gender is only denoted by pronouns. Only one item is associated with a female character, which is linked to the markedly uneven distribution of pronouns. The distribution of content words also skewed male.
In both texts, the fluid representation of gender through language operates beyond the level of utterances. It's expressed through the changes in attachment of words rather than the number of items present or the frequency. In The Paper Bag Princess, while in the beginning of the text, conventionally feminine content words are attached to a female character, this pattern of attachment changes. Feminine content words are replaced by male content words as the story goes on. For example, verbs like chase, banged, and shouted, typically male aligned because they index aggression, are attached to a female character. This change in attachment indexes the female character's proactivity, as opposed to passivity, which is typical of a princess. It's how the text represents gender fluidly. The change in pattern of attachment denotes how the text subverts the damsel in distress narrative along lines of gender, and consequently how the text speaks to and challenges prevailing beliefs about gender. In The Rainbow Fish, fluid representation of gender is achieved through implicature, which is expressed through, again, the pattern of attachment. What is being implied about gender, the implicature the text makes about gender, is contingent on the relationship between a content word and the gender denotative item to which that word is attached. Like beauty and its other forms are attached exclusively to a male character in the text. The book in its entirety revolves around Rainbow Fish's relationship with beauty and what that relationship means. Consequently, the attachment of beauty to a male character denotes the connection of a female-aligned thematic concern with a male character, and denotes a text fluid representation of gender. This attachment marks how the text undermines the gender preferentiality of these narratives, the word beauty, and its associations.
In our third category of books, ones which included overt examples of nonconformity, we included My Princess Boy and I Am Jazz. In the 2009 book My Princess Boy by Cheryl Kilo Davis, we found the distribution to be uneven for both gender denotative items and content words. A total of 113 denotative items were counted. Of those items, 82 were associated with males and in comparison to the 31 items associated with females, showing a markedly uneven distribution of denotative items. With reference to content words, all the items that were observed were linked to the male character. In the 2014 book I Am Jazz by Jessica Herthel and Jazz Jennings, we observed an even distribution of gender noun forms which can account for the even distribution of gender denotative items between males and females as well. There was a complete absence of gender pronouns throughout the text. The most noticeable difference was observed in the distribution of content words between male and female. Of all the content words noted, only one of them was associated with a female character, showing a markedly uneven distribution of content words.
Despite this unevenness, though, these texts demonstrate a fluid representation of gender, again shown through the pattern of attachment rather than the number of items or the frequency, but with an addition. They move from juxtaposing gender preferential items to gender exclusive items. In My Princess Boy, the conjunction of princess and boy produces a contradiction in terms with regards to gender that disrupts their respective meanings. It's in effect reinforced by the repeated attachment of female-aligned content words to a male figure throughout the text. And together, these usages of language undermine and interrogate the assumed relationship between these content words and the gender with which they're aligned.
I Am Jazz, similarly to My Princess Boy, attaches conventionally feminine words like makeup, pink, and princess, which are attributed to a character who is biologically male. Associating traditionally masculine or feminine features with the character that identifies with the opposing gender shows one form of nonconformity to traditional gender roles. More importantly, a new gender term absent from previous texts is introduced. It explicitly uses the word transgender to indicate that the main character is not simply a boy who likes and uses girl stuff, as is implied in My Princess Boy. The usage of the word transgender shows a change in ideas concerning gender, showing an inclusion of more than two accepted identities.
And conclusions. So comparing the data regarding how texts represent and construct gender, we found that the pattern of attachment rather than the frequency of attachment is what's significant. In occupational books, fluid gender representation is achieved via the attachment of gender preferential content words to gender neutral expressions. In books exhibiting covert gender nonconformity, fluid representation is achieved through the attachment of gender preferential content words to other gendered figures. And in books exhibiting overt gender nonconformity, fluid representation is achieved through the attachment of gender preferential and gender exclusive words to other gendered figures. It creates and reinforces a contradiction in terms with regards to gender and implications and significance. So most of the text we analyzed on some level and to varying extents interrogate gender. So the question is how language is used to that object. How specific usages of language achieve a fluid representation of gender, how these usages have changed across time, and what the significance of these changes are. In this sense, these changes mark how our understanding of gender itself has changed. Latest texts, again, achieve fluid representation through a contradiction in terms that generates new meanings and denotes a new conception of gender. It reveals how society is moving away from an essentialist understanding to a new paradigm where gender is no longer written by the body, but on the body.
Additionally, since children are in the process of developing their beliefs about gender, it can be concluded their thinking is easily affected by environmental influences. Because of this, the way gender is depicted in books they read matters. These portrayals reflect what society deems as acceptable or appropriate and can affect the way children see and act toward themselves and others. Stereotype representations include limited views of what people are, what they can do, or what they should do. This may limit children's interests and choices, as well as prevent them from truly expressing themselves. More flexible representations of gender not only offer more positive depictions, but also encourage a greater variety of possibilities. Fluid representations of gender teach children that being different is okay, and that there is no limit to what they can achieve. Alrighty, guys, thanks for watching. That is the end of our presentation. Thank you very much.